Bryan O'Lynn had no breeches to wear, so he borrowed a sheepskin to make him a pair, with the fleshy side out and the woolly side in. They'll be pleasant and cool, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn had no shirt to his back. He went to his neighbour's and borrowed a sack. Then he puckered the meal bag up under his chin. They'll take them for ruffles, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn had no hat to his head. He thought that the pot would do him instead. Then he murdered a cod for the sake of its fin. 'Twill pass for a feather, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn was hard up for a coat. He borrowed a skin of a neighbouring goat, with the horns sticking out of the pockets, and then they'll take 'em for pistols, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn had no stockings to wear. He bought him a rat's skin to make him a pair. He then drew them on and they fitted his shin. They're elegant wares, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn had no shoes to his toes. He hopped onto crab shells to serve him for those. Then he scraped out 2 oysters that matched like a twin. They'll shine out like buckles, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn had no watch to put on. He scooped out a turnip to make himself one. Then he placed a young cricket in under the skin. They'll think it's a ticking, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn to his house had no door. He'd the sky for a roof and the bog for a floor. He'd a way to jump out and a way to swim in. It's a fine habitation, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn went a-courting one night. He set both the mother and daughter to fight. To fight for his hand they both stripped to the skin. Sure I'll marry you both, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn, his wife and wife's mother, were all going home o'er the bridge together. The bridge it broke down and they all tumbled in. We'll go home by water, says Bryan O'Lynn. Bryan O'Lynn and his wife and wife's mother, they all lay down in the one bed together. The night it was cold and the blankets were thin. Sure I'll sleep in the middle, says Bryan O'Lynn.